Okay, here we got Apocalypse in the East. This is an Against the Odds magazine game. This magazine was kind of interesting. It came with 3 games in it. This one, I guess the main title game, which is what I was most interested in. This is fighting against the Byzantines, the Caliphate attacking the Byzantines in a particularly an interesting period of time for me. This is really before any real Muslim histories that survived have made it through. Yes, there's writing afterwards that may have been taken from information that was preserved, but it's really questionable. It feels like Islam purged itself at some point after the big civil wars in Islam. And there's a lot of questions about, the truthfulness of anything that comes across from Muslim sources from here. I think the earliest thing is more than a century later. And for real, more detailed historical information, we're talking a couple of centuries later. However, the designer indicated, I think in personal correspondence essentially on BGG, when I was complaining about how much you can trust what's here, he had both Byzantine and Armenian sources that were from the same period. And given that this is a military-focused game, it's probably pretty reasonable to utilize those sources. You can never trust ancient sources, but I think he's got probably a pretty good grip on what's going on enough to be able to handle it. From a personal side, I picked this up a while ago, okay? And because I was so excited, especially about, the rise of Islam and what it's about and everything. And, what it was about before whatever that great purge was, okay? Because there's real, the sources from the Muslim side are very questionable, and it's also very questionable what the religion was like at all at that point. There are arguments that, it's essentially a sect of Christianity or a sect of Judaism at the early point. This doesn't touch on any of that, which is fine. It is a war game after all. Excuse me. Again, I was trying to get to the personal thing. I ended up going out dancing on Friday night. I was already sick. I knew that I was coming down with something, had a sore throat, a little bit of sniffles and whatnot. It is Tuesday now, and I've been basically unable to do much except maybe come up here a couple of times to try to start setting up. Because, well, first of all, colds hit me harder than they should. That has been the case even before I started smoking, and now with all the smoking I do, it does not help. So it was really weird because dancing was on Halloween, and I wasn't planning on going because it was Halloween. And then I found out that, they were going to open it up early and have kind of an all-ages show, and that convinced me into going for various reasons, one of which is just the energy would be different, and it really was. There were trick-or-treater age kids coming in, and it was just cool. It was just cool in many ways. I, of course, don't remember much of the later part of the night, as I never do. I want to check something before I continue on. I'll be back in a moment. This is actually the only detailed military-type game that I have on the subject. I thought maybe Imperium Romanum would cover it. I got stuff, like Barbarians may handle some of this. What the hell? Invasions definitely covers it, but it's a sort of a Britannia type game. Look at over here. Barbarians at the Gate. I don't know if Barbarians does. I've got that pretty far back, so probably not. Cataphract might handle some battles within this period. But yeah, for the most part, this is something that is a big gap for me. So that's kind of cool. Let's take a look at what you have in the game. First of all, you have a map that you have to cut apart. Cut the bottom part, paste it together here to give you a little bit more of Armenia. There was no way to really do it any other way, I guess. The magazine itself, I don't know how to feel about Against the Odds. You know, it's like, these are guys who are writing in it. It's got a decent amount of information, a decent amount of writing in it, but a lot of them, you know, feel like they have, some specialties, like this guy was the guy who designed this has a special interest in Byzantine history, and he, I believe, is a historian himself. But a number of, the articles are like talking about situations and then linking them to games that have already been produced or whatever, without really being, an extensive discussion of game history within it. But it's like just weird to have them crop up in terms of the kind of discussion. It feels like something I might write if I were writing. Of course, these are people in the hobby and whatnot. It's not so much like before, where necessarily you have a whole hell of a lot of I don't know. I'm thinking the S&T type stuff, but most of the really, nail it down type information was more a matter of stuff that was modern era stuff, or detailed comparisons of World War II equipment and stuff like that. The magazine doesn't have that sort of flavor to it. It does have good historical information, both on, let's see what we got here. We got a discussion of the actual campaigns here, and then a further discussion on the guards. This one goes in a little bit into the gaming type stuff. I found it kind of odd that Cataphract was not mentioned in here. Let me check that as well then. Later period than this game, again, or an earlier period than this game, I'm sorry. My brain doesn't work too well, but it would include information on these guys, and I found it kind of interesting that it wasn't even popped in here, whereas some other games were in there. Got a discussion on hand-to-hand combat. Why am I going through all this? I don't know. And then, the rest of it is just sort of the standard stuff. Now, there were two other games in this magazine. One of them was a World War II thing, a little one-page type game, kind of a mini-game type thing. I don't know if I'll ever get to it. It's not something I would have bought. But then the other is a postcard game by this Rohrbauer guy. And, they stick the postcard games in for whatever reason to try to sell you on stuff or whatever. And then it's got additional expansion rules in the magazine for it. So I may do that. And then information about the caliphates, which again doesn't touch on, it sticks to sort of the, to being non-controversial. Not dealing too much sticking to the Islamic history as it's dealt with, but then it goes to later periods, all the way up until ISIS and whatnot. And I thought this was pretty interesting to read. I actually read through the entire magazine. Get something on Plan 1919, which is covered in the Great War. There's a scenario for it in there, which is kind of cool. But anyway, let's get back to the game. I got to swap batteries. I know I'm like delaying. I don't know why. Mainly because I read these rules before Friday, and now they're kind of a blur and everything. Because the main problem is my drippy nose and my sniffles and stuff like that have prevented me from being able to come up here. But I also thought my cough would be disturbing. I know that's been mentioned other times, but I don't let, your comfort have any effect on anything. A little random personal thing. I saw something, a local dairy farm, whatever, conglomerate, is selling, this is supposedly for grilled cheese sandwich, a combination of mayonnaise and butter to spread for your frying grilled cheese sandwiches. And that just led me as what the fuck, And somebody posted it, and I most of the people were like, what the hell is this for? A few people like me mentioned, hey, I put the mayonnaise on the inside, that makes sense. I actually tried it out, not this particular product, but I tried, because one person mentioned they fry it with the mayonnaise on the outside. So I tried that, and surprisingly, it's no worse in terms of like greasiness and whatnot than, frying the butter on the outside, which one would normally do. But it's also no better. Like, the mayonnaise on the outside frying the mayonnaise doesn't seem to help the flavor, unlike frying the butter on the bread. I mean, it's more grease, whatever. But I use the same amount of butter I would. All right, so what do we have? The map itself covers from Egypt, has to hit all of Armenia, because that's an important facet to this, through Asia Minor. And obviously the goal of Constantinople for the Islamists. It's not the only goal in the game. The counters themselves, I found these kind of painful. I'm finding them hard to read. Not the numbers on the back, but I'm finding the appearance of the color there, which is supposed to match stuff here. It doesn't quite line up properly. And I'm finding some of the colors kind of close. I'm not absolutely certain which contingent I'm looking at any given time. I'm also looking, the Byzantine pieces don't look all that different from the Islamic pieces color-wise. Yeah, I know, but in a game of this sort, I almost feel like you could have gone with something a little bit more severely different. And in particular, stuff like the leadership counters and the army counters, I think this is a leader, I'm finding hard to distinguish from each other. I don't know why, especially when there's this pale writing on these. This is just a quick thing. The numbers on the land counters are not attack defense or attack move or combat movement or anything like that. They're actually clear terrain combat value and rough terrain combat value. That's an interesting little distinction that I think is actually really important in this period. Kind of like it. The leaders, I don't know if this is a leader. This is an army group. Looks kind of like a leader, so it confuses me. Here's a leader, I think, because I looked at him before. Has his bonus written on the back of him, whatever that may be, which can affect combat. It can affect attrition capabilities. The backs of the combat counters have like a shield on the back. That's to indicate that they're in a garrison situation. The fleets also have a garrison. For them, it's just a little anchor, like this. The Muslims don't start out with a fleet. The leader here, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name, Muhai, okay, I'm trying to, but whatever. He ends up becoming the caliph later, but he basically tries to convince, or succeeds in convincing the caliph that he should build a navy to fight the Byzantines, that he needs that. He's the leader in Syria at this point. You're going to have possible political effects, because the Armenians are not entirely loyal, and there are some options as to what you do. I took the most loyal that I could. You got your normal turn record track here. Here you've got boxes to hold the various armies. This is not that. This is the Muslim armies. Destroyed unit box. One army group for the Byzantines. That doesn't seem right. Yeah, I don't think that's right. I thought it was 3 and 5, but it looks like it's 3 and 1 here. I don't know. The terrain effects chart sort of kind of the different kinds of cities. You have a TEC over here that's more useful, along with combat results table. 1 copy for each player if you want to cut that apart. I mean, you would if you're playing opposed. I don't need to right now. And I'm probably never going to get to play this opposed. Some distinction, which isn't easy to see necessarily, because the colors on here, again, don't match the colors here. So a mountain, I'm guessing, is this dark stuff, and this light stuff is up here, rough. I'm just guessing desert is this yellowy type stuff, which all kind of blends in. Let's put someone there. Most of the units are set up kind of freely. I'm running out of battery here, and I think I want to stop before I dive into the rules. I got a little bit of a fever here. One of the key things that this game kind of manages to accomplish, from what I get from the rules, we'll see how it plays out, is it has this distinction between units in garrison, units on patrol, which are pretty much cav units meant to represent the Byzantine, I don't know, sort of the equivalent to the limites of the Romans, but where they're utilizing, some sort of defensive, flexible capabilities. And I think this should not be one. I think I put something where it doesn't belong, so I'm going to look. Because I think the only units that can be in patrol are cav, and that is not a cav. To slow down any kind of advances. But then finally, you have major forces or expeditions, which are going to be the forces that actually, can take territory and whatnot and operate as, a functional war force. I have to look this unit up, try to see if I have something that can replace that. I shifted things around so that I've got a legitimate placement here. I picked a unit that had a high defense in non-clear terrain, or a high combat capability in non-clear terrain. All right, let's start looking at the rules. Let me shift this even a little further so you can get some room here. A lot of opening information here. Kind of a waste of space as far as I'm concerned, but you got to make it so that the insert comes out properly. I mean, it's not totally. It gives you a the case number system, theory on how to play and everything. How to learn a game. It feels like at this point, if you're buying a war game from a magazine, I don't know that you need all that. introduction, that's useful, but again, the game comes in a magazine with a lot of information about that. Is it that necessary? I don't know. Supposedly, Muslim units have a green-colored background and Byzantines have a red-colored. Okay, I can buy the red-colored for the Byzantines, but I look at the Muslims, that's not green. If it was more distinct, it would be more helpful to me. The color stripe indicates what army they belong to. This is something else that I've had trouble distinguishing. I'm not entirely sure. This is an important facet to play, as is telling which side you're talking about, but I don't think that's going to get confused. It's just they're too close. But I found that the color stripes in some cases look like they're just too similar to each other. So there are 3 Muslim armies. Syria, we can actually see them here. Yeah, those are pretty distinctive. But let's talk about the Byzantines because there are 5. And they have a brick red stripe, a pink stripe, and those are the 2 that I'm not sure that I really can tell apart very well. So we got kind of this pink stripe here. That's going to be these colors. The brick red is, I guess, this color. It is distinct. It's just, I don't know. Could have probably gotten away with like a blue or something like that, which they don't bother using for the Byzantines, unless the Egyptians, no, they're this pink. Okay, whatever. Okay. 7 Byzantine units are called Schola, and they have this on them. They're deployed initially in fixed locations. They're all weak strength units. Those in addition to any units that have a ground combat value of 6 or more, and I think that's 6 or more in clear terrain, but I'm not positive of that, are going to be considered elite picked class units. They cost double for stacking. Mounted units have a horse on both sides. All of the Byzantine units are normal. Muslim units don't have class, so they're all the same. The combat factors, the 2 numbers, the number on the left is clear and desert. The number on the right is for any other terrain, including fighting at sea. The reverse side is the garrison mode. Leaders have a banner of the color of the army they command, except for the imperial couple, who have some white text on them. And on the back, whatever they say their impact on combat is noted. It isn't only on combat, it also affects attrition at the very least, maybe other things. Each turn is going to count as a year. You check an events table, which is simply a die rolling thing. Generate replacements, maintain fleets, which is going to be based on the number of port symbols you have. I think that's the number of fleets that can stay in that location, although I vaguely remembered something like double that number. I couldn't find the rule for it. So I don't know. We'll see. 2.4 is supposed to cover that. I just saw that in the... Yeah, that's the fleet maintenance, and I'm not seeing... Anyway, if you control ports, that's the number of fleets that you're going to be allowed to have on the board. And you get more fleets every year. If you lose them, up to your number, and you reduce your fleets if you lose cities points for them. Mode adjustment, that's moving out of garrison and whatnot. You're able to gather an army or spread one back out. And then attrition segment. Then the Muslim is allowed to move his forces by sea, and there could be combat within that. Then the Byzantines are allowed to move by sea. Then the Byzantines are allowed to move their patrol units, which are those horse units I have out, and this battery is already dead. What the fuck? Then the Muslims are able to move their expeditions that aren't traveling by sea, and they can attack enemy units, whether it's another expedition or a garrison mode. Units in patrol slow your movement and then maybe die. And then the Byzantines likewise get to move by land with their expeditions and take any attacks. And then it's the end of the turn. The Muslims win by capturing Constantinople. The Byzantines win by killing Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, who is over here. He is, the brother of the caliph, I don't know, or nephew or something like that. But he will become the next caliph, and he's sort of in charge of this whole operation, or holding Constantinople till the end of the game, which means that Uthman, the current caliph, will be deposed, and Islam is thrown into a civil war. We're going to swap batteries out for whatever that's worth, because I want to keep going a bit. The events, it's going to be 2 dice. It's on the back of the rules, not in the charts and tables. It takes up a whole page. Whenever an event occurs, it can usually only be happening once. There are exceptions for earthquakes and storms at sea, which can happen multiple times, neither of which is terribly likely. Earthquake sounds devastating. Storms at sea definitely is. Both sides get to replace during replacements. There are 6 cities that are fabrici. Those are, with that symbol, there'll be a walled city with the same functionality as any other walled city in terms of movement and stacking. But they can also build stuff. They list them here: Constantinople, Nicomedia, Irenopolis, Antioch, Damascus, and Nakhchivan. I don't know what that is. For the possession of each of these, the Muslim player may select one unit of the Syrian army that's been destroyed and put it in the friendly fabrica. The Byzantines can select one mounted or picked unit or 1 die worth of footbound units. Fleet maintenance. Like I said, you have to check how many cities, how many anchor symbols you have on cities and towns, and that's the number of naval units that you can support. Both players count the number of symbols they control at the beginning of their turn, and the result is the number of naval units that player may have for the turn. If it's different from what they have, they must adjust this by adding or removing. New naval units are placed in garrison mode in any friendly controlled port hex. If a port has been pillaged, it no longer functions as a port. It kind of doesn't function as anything, I think. And the owning player's naval maintenance suffers in his next administrative phase. Now, this is fucked up because the Muslims start out with no fleets on the board. So the maintain fleets happens in each turn. I don't know what's going on with that. Like, it doesn't make any sense for them not to be able to get fleet. Like, the rules seem to indicate they just get their fleets on the board. So I don't think that should be the case. Like I said, there's 3 modes on the map: garrison, patrol, and within an expedition. If they're in an expedition, they're in the box, and there's a counter on the map for them. Unit is, when it's in garrison, it's got its shield or anchor on a town or city. That's up to, so when a unit enters garrison, it has a 10 movement point trace that it has to make to enter a city. The town or city can't be occupied by enemy units. The stacking is over on the terrain effects chart over there. And they can't move or attack, but they can be attacked or laid siege to. Mounted Byzantine units can be placed on patrol mode. This can be done, this is during the modes phase, which again is here, this mode adjustment, which, you know, would allow you to reposition all your forces at the beginning of the game. Again, it feels a little weird on the first turn. You take the unit and place it non-garrison side face up in its current hex in the admin phase. It's 10 movement points without sea travel. Only 1 mounted unit in patrol can occupy a hex. It will not it will not interfere with units in garrison or any Byzantine expeditions. While on patrol, the unit has a zone of control of the 6 surrounding hexes. A Muslim expedition entering a zone of control loses 2 dice worth of movement points, in addition to the cost of entering the hex. If the Muslim expedition continues to move into the hex occupied by the patrolling unit, both the patrolling unit and 1 Muslim unit are removed to the destroyed units box. Now, you can also go into expedition mode, and this needs to be done if you're going to attack anything, which leads me to the, okay, you got to go through the administrative phase, and there's nothing that kind of indicates you don't do this on the first turn. The only place where it's really fucked up is the fact that the Muslims look like they get their navy on the first turn, and I'm not sure, you know, why they don't set it up or something. There are 3 Muslim expeditions and 1 Byzantine. Units currently in garrison or in patrol may be placed in an expedition. Select a hex where the expedition will be gathered. Must be within 10 movement points by land or sea from one of these cities: Constantinople, Damascus, or Fustat. The Muslim player places as many units from one of his armies as he wants to in the army's expedition box on the map. Remember, armies are color-coded by the bars on them. Now, there are 3 Muslim armies, I think. One is in Egypt, one is in Syria. This other one is Kufa, and I don't think there's any pieces from that army on the map yet. I can check that here. There are not. That army comes in due to an event. The Byzantine player can place units from up to 2 armies in the expedition box on the map, and leaders of the mustered armies must be included in the expedition. Doesn't say how many or whatever, but let's keep going. Exception: Constans, the emperor, but never Fausta, his wife, may be substituted for another leader in the expedition at the Byzantine player's discretion. It's not clear that, like, you don't have to put your entire army in this space, but it sounds like you have to put all your leaders in the space, in the expedition. Lastly, place the expedition counter on the map in non-camp mode where the player wants it to start. Make sure the Muslim expedition counter matches the units in the expedition. Okay. So, if I wanted to create a Syrian army, say based on this, Damascus is the nearest thing, 10 movement points from there. This is the front side. This is the camp side. It kind of looks like there's a camp there. Kind of, sort of, whatever. An expedition has a base movement allowance by land. All Muslim expeditions and a Byzantine expedition that only has mounted units has a base movement of 40. Otherwise, Byzantines have a base movement of 20. Subtract 1 from this for each unit in the expedition. This will be how many movement points the expedition has available for the turn. So they give an example: 2 mounted units, 2 picked units, and 5 foot units. 2, 2, 5. Yeah, they're not double counting the picked units here, right? No. And that reduces it from 20 to 11. An expedition's movement points may never be traded or saved. To enter each hex or cross a hex side costs you the movement points. If a moving expedition doesn't have enough movement points to remaining to enter the hex, it must end its movement. So there's an interesting, balance between how fast you want to go and how big you want your army to be and stuff like that. When an expedition moves, it may attack enemy units in field or sea battle, or enemy towns and cities via siege. It costs an extra movement point to enter a hex containing an enemy unit, regardless of its mode of the enemy unit. After fighting a battle or conducting a siege, the expedition can move further if it has the movement points for it. After ending an expedition's move for a turn, you can either camp the expedition, flipping it over. During the following administration phase, campaign attrition will be checked for that expedition. Now, what's weird about that is that mode adjustment happens before the attrition segment. That feels wrong. This is performed by rolling a d6 on the attrition table. Take a look at what that looks like. It's going to be based on the clear terrain combat factors, and it'll give you a number of units that you have to lose. On the next turn, the expedition will be allowed to move again. If a player does not wish to camp, or his expedition has been defeated and he's completed a route movement, the expedition must be disbanded. The markers removed. All surviving military units are put in garrison up to 10 movement points away in friendly towns and cities. Units unable to stack in the cities or towns are moved, are placed in the destroyed unit box. Leader counters may be moved to any friendly occupied hex up to 10 movement points away. And if there is none, they're removed from the game. They're destroyed, not removed from the game. They say destroyed due to battle, siege, attrition, overstacking. These are put in the destroyed box and are out of the game. No, there's the replacement rules. They're not out of the game. They're off the board. A really poor choice of description. I feel like there's something very wrong with the sequence of play in the admin phase in a number of ways. And I'm not really able to resolve that. I think that the Muslims shouldn't have a navy in the first turn, because they're not setting one up. I feel like the attrition segment has to come before the mode adjustment segment so that you actually suffer the attrition. Because otherwise, so here's the thing. I could disband an army, a Muslim army that advanced in the first turn, but then it would have to reform within 10 of Damascus. So there's a reason you'd still want to camp. That's not really the issue. It's also not clear whether or not I can add units to an expedition as reinforcements. I don't think so. I think you form an expedition and you keep going, but again, stacking. Each hex has stacking limits. The number of units that can stack in a hex is noted on the terrain effects chart. It is very small. Picked units with a clear terrain. Yeah, here we go to the picked units. So they say with a clear terrain combat value of 6 or more. Before it was just a combat value of 6 or more. I'm going to take this as the definitive. Count as, again, these rules, I thought they were better on read through, but now I'm finding issues here, there, and everywhere as I go through with the comb. Count as 2 units against stacking limits in a hex. Units that are part of an expedition do not count towards stacking. This is important because otherwise you couldn't move an expedition of more than a couple of units. Overstacking is checked at the end of movement of each phase, and the owning player has to destroy units to bring the hex back into stacking. I am going to pause for a bit. I'm tired. And, this sickness is making it hard for me to cope. Most people don't stick around for the full rules reading anyway, but this is where I find, my first impression of the rules was that they felt pretty good. Now I'm hitting, oh yeah, that doesn't match up now that I'm, really kind of working my way through them again. They all fit in towards the advice that they give as to how you should read these rules, which is that you shouldn't memorize them or anything like that. What do they say here? Begin by familiarizing yourself with the components, then skim through the charts and rules, reading all the titles of the modules, set up the game scenario, and then play portions of it, play a trial game, looking up the rules as you need to. I mean, they never really say that you should. They're like saying, look at the table of contents. I mean, this doesn't even make sense. Anybody who tried to follow what they're saying here is not gonna really get the game enough to be able to play effectively. You really do have to read the rules. Do you have to memorize them? No, but it almost feels like there's this attitude of, yeah, the rules kind of don't really matter all that much. And maybe they didn't. Do we have, this is always the check, do we have a separate developer? We do. This was showing the signs of not having a serious development effort being put in. And, it's not one of the names that I recognize as being associated with, publication of the magazine or whatever, which might be a very, very light development task. It looks like, it's a specific person, who was probably assigned this game. Maybe a couple others, but whatever, it feels like a right way to do development in terms of the naming, the credits, but the rules aren't showing signs of that. They're showing signs of being pretty shoddy, which, from my previous experience of Against the Odds, that is odd. They've tended to put out, the couple of games that I've played of theirs, they've tended to put out pretty solid games as far as I was concerned. On to the naval operations. I just want to point out, we got, 12 units and a commander, possibly some boats in a stack. That's pretty hefty stacking without some kind of off-board boxes. I'm thinking here, yeah, you have those kind of forces showing up in, say, Imperium Romanum as well, but they will be under a commander and thus, almost invariably. They might not, but this is a lot of units that can just be in garrison somewhere because it's convenient to do that. Okay. Okay, naval units can be used to carry an expedition during friendly movement phase. I don't know if that's actually accurate. It's during the sea move phase, if I recall correctly. Which, yeah, I mean, okay. They're all called movement phase. They're just specified, fine, whatever. Or to evacuate units under a siege in a port during the opponent's turn. Byzantine naval units have 40 movement points. Muslims only have 30. It's going to be hard stuff to remember. Lots of lookups on that kind of thing. At the end of a campaign year, the player's naval units must have ended their movement in a coastal hex or else they'll be destroyed. Remember, you basically get one move, so I mean, yeah. If a storm event has occurred, any naval units not in garrison mode in a port are destroyed. Port hexes have the anchors on them. Maybe here it tells me. Any military units stacked with the naval units must embark upon landing and may either continue movement if they have remaining movement points or camp. Now this is kind of fucked up because do they continue their movement during the naval move phase? And what are their remaining movement points? Are they paying movement for the naval movement? Things that are not answered in this that I recall. Or they can disperse into garrisons. A Byzantine naval unit can carry either 4 Byzantine foot, 2 mounted units, or 1 6+ battle value foot unit. A Muslim naval unit can carry 2 Muslim units. Each naval unit may also carry an unlimited number of leaders. Military units pay 1 movement point to embark or disembark. Is this the extent of their movement point cost for being sailed? I don't know. And 2 to embark or disembark. The first was in a port. The second is 2 on any coastal hex, i.e. it's not very expensive to, mount up on a fleet from any old coastal hex. I guess the idea is that there's some kind of, I don't know. I don't know. Fleets in the Delta. Naval units of both sides can move into hexes that have hex sides consisting of branches of the Nile River Delta. Now, this is not clearly defined. There are river hex sides, which would feel like they're just about everything in there, I guess. But they may not go further than Fustat, which is this hex. I guess that means they can't go here. I don't know. Again, hexes that have hex sides considering branches of the Nile River Delta, I don't know. I guess that means they can't go further back. Not that they particularly want to, but that is more Nile River Delta than I would have counted, but I guess it makes perfect sense. It's not just the swamps. Where are we? If military units enter a hex with an enemy naval unit alone in the hex, this I think includes coastal, the naval units are destroyed. Naval units in the Delta are not immune to storms. Field battle. So a form of combat that occurs when units of 2 opposing expeditions occupy the same hex. The player who moved last into the hex is the attacker. The other player with the encamped expedition is the defender. Does it have to be an encamped expedition? I guess, because after you move, you have to encamp or not. When the player moves into the hex, he rolls a d6. If it's a result of 1, then the attacker has surprised the defender and can storm the camp. Otherwise, it's a field battle. They determine the total battle value of all the units participating based on the terrain it's in. They compare the totals and find odds on the combat results table, which I guess we have here. That best represents the difference, rounding in favor of defender. Apply any leader column modifiers that apply. I don't remember how these are worded. This guy's Navy, isn't he? I can't tell. Shift 1, C, or field battle, yeah. He's both. The attacker rolls a die, consults the CRT to determine the battle result. One army or the other may be routed, destroyed, or it can be an attrition result. So attacker destroyed, attacker routed, attrition. Let's go into these. Rout. If you get a rout result, your army first has to take losses. If the defeated expedition is Byzantine, it loses as many units as there are in the Muslim expedition. If it's Muslim, he loses as many units as there are mounted units in the Byzantine expedition. So they escape routs undamaged if you only bring infantry. The losing player selects which units are lost, remove the expedition marker, and move the surviving units to friendly towns and or cities at least 10 movement points away, that are at least 10 movement points away. That seems unlikely. That feels like it's the opposite of what's desirable. And in stacking limits, flip the units into garrison mode. Wow. So I skimmed over that and just assumed it was within. Geez, I'm going to have to look for a rat on this because this game just feels so iffy. Ignore cases 6.21 to 6.23 if routing from attrition. We didn't hit the attrition result. I skipped that over. Destroyed, I guess, doesn't need explanation. For attrition, both sides, starting with the attacker, must place one unit of their participating forces into the destroyed unit box. This continues back and forth until a player elects to rout or one side has no further forces to destroy. If the attacker is the one with remaining forces, the expedition may continue. So this is kind of interesting. In attrition result, you have to rout, but you're not affected by any additional losses. But you do have to split up, and according to this, at least 10 movement points away. I'm going to jump away and check to see if there's any errata for this game, because I'm finding so many questions in these rules. I can't find an errata. I have found a second edition Living Rules. I'm going to skim through that and make corrections. I'll be back at some point. Amusing enough, the rule that triggered me hasn't been updated. I don't know. I can make a hand-wavy argument that the troops, want to get out of the area, they flee further back, whatever. I'm going to go with the rules as written. I'm assuming it's what's intended. I don't think it makes too big a difference. It was just sort of the last straw out of a series of things. There's quite a bit of errata. Some of it is more material than others. One of the most annoying is Irenopolis counts as a fabricum, but nothing stated to make it a city as well. So I'm just underlining it. It's in the list of fabricum and is not there. I'm assuming it's going to be a town with a fabricum. Okay, that's fine. I'm all right with dealing with that, although it's not going to appear as key as otherwise. This was really hard to find, by the way. I don't know why. I was searching all over up here, but anyway. So we do have a map error there. Of course, the paper is glossy. It's not the worst kind of glossy. I can get pencil to write on it. So there's an extra unit that counts as a picked class unit, but it's not a very big one. I just added that in case I can remember it. It affects stacking, but see, this is really weird because stacking is units in clear terrain with a 6+ count as 2 units against the stacking limit of the hex. So not all picked units count as that, and I'm really not sure. I don't think there was any real factor having to do with small picked units, so I don't know what effect it has. It may affect setup. I'm not going to revise if it does. I did find an answer to the navies. The Muslim aren't allowed to get their navies until 647, but then they get however many they get. Okay. I didn't see any change to this, which looks problematic to me. Like mode adjustment before attrition, I don't know. Guess it gives you one more chance to get out of there if you don't want to be in camp, I guess. It doesn't have much other effect. Looking for where else I have this very faint stuff. There's some special rules on the Armenian revolt where if they do revolt, they don't block Byzantine units. I'll look it up if I get into that circumstance. Okay. There's a clarification or something. It's not an actual correction, but the Egyptian Muslim units and I don't know what else this is. The Kufu are not able to be rebuilt. Only the Syrians can be rebuilt. They're sort of the regular army. The ship shelter is indeed the number of ports that had to be added. I had pretty much guessed that, but okay. Here's Kufa. See what else I got here. Okay, here's something. Modes. The Muslims have to choose first in the first 5 turns of the game, and from turn 6 onward, the Byzantines have to choose their modes first. I don't know how big a deal that's going to be. Garrisons now have a redeployment capability during the mode phase. You can shift them within 10 hexes. As is often the case when I'm reading errata, I get lazier as I go. I'm just like, yeah, okay. They specified here, they continue moving if they have remaining movement points. They added in the movement phase. Yeah, okay. These are all movement phases. You're not helping. Like that clarification. But the fact that they added that convinces me that they do the movement in the land movement phase. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's what they put there. I think they're going to pay movement point costs, the units on board the ship, according to this. Of course, it says naval units only for the sea movement cost, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that the ground units wouldn't be paying any cost to move around at sea. It may slow down some invasions or whatnot. It just feels more realistic to me, so fuck it. Again, it's possible over on Consim World there's more information. This is not directly present in on BGG, but there was a, hey, you can look, the updated rules are here. And so I just went with that. You know, these games, they tend to, the magazine games especially, tend to kind of be ignored after a couple of years. You know, a lot of errata gets found on them. I'm really disappointed with Against the Odds. They had me convinced that they put together some pretty good games in terms of solidity of the rules. This one, not so much. And I think I skipped all the way over to then here where, hey, yeah, it actually was in the rules. Okay, so where were we? We're on the field battle. We talked about routes. We got to get to leaders in battle. I'm going to light my pipe and start from there. This can affect battle on the back. It indicates the number of odds column shifts on field or sea battles if the units in the expedition are destroyed. Any leaders with the expedition are also destroyed if all units are destroyed, sorry. A leader left alone will be destroyed if he's stepped on. They're not replaceable. There's a specification in the living rules that indicates that they are not cumulative. I know that there's some weirdness though. Let's see what this guy is. This guy gives 2 shifts in field battles. He's really good, but he's potentially disloyal, so I'm going with the loyal guy, who doesn't seem to have any advantages. I remember there being ones that give an advantage in attrition. It's not clear what that is. It's not spelled out here, and it's not in the living rules. I'm assuming it's on the attrition table, but it might have something to do with the attrition result. We'll see when we hit it, what I figure. Byzantine reserves. The Byzantine player has the option to put units in reserve in a battle. He declares this before the start of the battle. He can select up to, but not more than half his units, plus one personality, and declare these as a reserve. They're not counted in the battle. They're unaffected by negative combat results. In that case, the reserve may perform one of three functions. The Byzantine player can declare after the battle result which role they'll take. They can feed the battle. You can take losses out of the reserve. That doesn't really help you. But, okay, I guess in the attrition. Counterattack. If the result is rout or destruction, the Byzantine player can order the reserve to counterattack. This is done after the initial combat roll, but before carrying out the result. The battle is refought with the reserve units now standing in for the original units. If the Byzantine player loses, all his units from original and reserve are destroyed. If he wins, then all Muslim units are destroyed. What if it's attrition? I don't know. This seems like a really weird option, because you'd be halving the size of your army. Is there a lot of luck on this table? Doesn't look like there's a shit ton of luck. You can only take it on a rout or destruction. So I guess you might be looking at it on a 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 attack as the attacker. I don't know. You might also be looking at it as, I don't know. I honestly don't know why you'd pick that. I know there was a suggestion in the player's notes, if there are such. Maybe it was in the designer's notes. Must be in the designer's notes, that talked about this was a powerful option for them, but it doesn't feel like it so far. Then cover the rout move. When the Byzantine army routs, whether voluntary or not, the Byzantine player can order his reserves to cover the rout. This means that each mounted unit in the reserve removes the effect of one Muslim unit in determining losses before the rout move. This seems like a very powerful option, on the other hand. Moreover, reserve units may not be taken as losses under this option, even if there's no other unit to lose. So if you're going to lose the battle, it's not bad to have the reserve. You can prevent yourself from taking those rout losses, which are pretty hefty, to some extent. Okay, storming a camp. If a 1 is rolled when an expedition moves into an encamped enemy expedition, surprise has been achieved, and resolution of the battle is performed similar to attrition, except the defender has to lose 2 units for every unit the attacking player eliminates. The attacker eliminates first, then the defender, let's keep reading. Attacker eliminates first. This continues until one side decides to rout. Mounted units are not counted for assault or defense. I guess that means they can't take losses. I don't know. That's kind of weird. But what's really weird about this is the attacker takes a loss and the defender flees, routing. The defender who routs from an attrition result ignores the additional losses, so they get surprised, their camp gets raided, they somehow murder some of the attackers who are trying to make it in, and then get away scot-free. Wow, that does not sound impressive. All right, let me check that one just to make sure that I didn't miss something, because like I said, I got kind of sloppy towards the end. I might have skipped something, but this again seems like complete bullshit. No clarification there. I did find a thread on BGG where they're talking about the integration of land and naval movement. And boy, was this interesting. Somebody asked a question, gave a whole list of stuff regarding it. It was pretty complicated for me to process because I have trouble reading things off screen, obviously. And the game designer answered the question. Then a playtester jumped in with some sort of wow, that's not what I remember from playtesting. Then the developer jumped in with something like the designer wasn't following what the game design was. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Nobody discusses the idea that the ground units spend any movement points at sea, though. That wasn't even raised in this. I'm just left with my God, if the designer and developer aren't in agreement with what the game rules actually say, what the fuck? And they seem not to be at all. So I don't know. I'm like, I'm going to try to make the best of this hash that I can and not try to puzzle out threads that are that confusing in it. So, yeah, the counterattack storming the camp appears to be a horrible thing, sort of. Like, it's not the worst that could happen, but the attacker takes a loss and the defender gets away scot-free. Seems to be the basis of it. Oh, wait, no, here we go. Except the defender must eliminate 2 units for every unit the attacking player eliminates. Okay. That fixes that. Mounted units, wait, what? Hold on. Didn't we just have something where mounted units were not? Did I misread this? I must have just misread it. Mounted units are counted for assault and defense. Yeah, I guess they always are. Put sentences like that in, that should be like a clarification or something to the rule, and just because why would you not? Town and city battles. Unlike field battles, an expedition cannot attack an enemy garrison except by laying siege or assaulting. In both instances, the attacking player must have at least as many units in the expedition as there are units in the town-city hex. Sounds fair. If the attacker declares a siege, put the expedition stack on top of the garrison. The besieging player rolls a d6 if the target is a town, 2 if it's a city. He multiplies that sum by the number of units in the garrison. This will be the number of movement points lost by the expedition. If the expedition has 0 or more remaining movement points, the town or city falls and its garrison's destroyed. A successful besieging player may leave as many units. You can always drop units off, but you cannot pick them up. I did find that in the clarifications. As he wishes in garrison mode in the conquered city, and if he has movement points remaining, can continue moving the expedition. If the expedition has negative movement points, the siege is stalled, and the expedition will have to camp in the hex. Okay. An assault. If you declare an assault, you must try to breach the walls. You roll a d6 and consult the siege assault table, which is over here. And depending on the quality, you have a certain die roll. On a 1, it looks like you lose a sieging unit. If the walls are breached, then the assault can take place. The attacker removes one of his units and places it in the destroyed. Then the defender does the same. This alternates, continuing until one side's completely eliminated. If the walls are not breached, nothing happens, and the attacking expedition must camp or disband. Here, mounted units cannot be used to assault or defend a town. If it's part of the defense, they're destroyed once all the other units are destroyed. If a city or town is taken by an assault, you roll a die. On a 5 or 6, there's a pillage marker, and that will be treated like a pillaged town or city hex. It has much less effect. We'll get to that later, I guess. Ports and sieges. A player may not stop the escape of enemy units from a port unless he has friendly naval units in the hex as well. If a player assaults a port and breaches its walls, the defender can elect, but not for siege, note, the defender can elect to evacuate the garrison, provided he has naval units in the hex. Keep in mind the naval unit transport capabilities. The naval units transport the escaping units up to 10 movement points towards the nearest friendly unpillaged port. You want to make sure you land on a coast, though. because, well, it depends on the movement ordering. All right, we're going to check that one because this was one of my other questions. And again, I may have been lax in my looking for elements, but it felt to me like, hey, if you're under siege, you should be able to get out of there. Change to the living rules, so we'll play it as written. I'm going to stop here. Yeah, it seems a lot clearer to me. Like, it seems more obvious to me that you would be able to slowly withdraw troops onto the boats during a siege rather than during an assault. During an assault, it feels like you'd have to at least lose something, and you'd probably have to lose something in a siege too, to hold the walls for a while. Any interpretation that I might take feels a little illogical to like a complete escape, but you could make an argument that like during a siege, or maybe an assault as well, but certainly not just during an assault, you'd be able to let the city garrison kind of hold the walls to some extent, even though, as far as I can tell, there is no city garrison. If you don't have a unit garrisoning something, you can't just hold it. All right, we're going to break there. We're getting close to the end of the rules, but my tolerance has dropped and my T has dropped even further. My battery did not charge properly. All right, naval battles. When a naval expedition encounters an opposing naval units not in garrison, a naval battle occurs. If any military units are camped in the same hex as the defending naval units, they can go into the battle as well, as long as there's room on the ships. Now, this is all very weird, right? Because we had something a little earlier with navies. Hold on. Fleets in the Delta. There's a statement here. If military units enter a hex with enemy naval units alone in the hex, the naval units are destroyed. This seems to apply to coastal hexes as well. I don't know. There's just so many questions with this game. Anyway, if any military units are camped in the same hex, they can go into battle as well, provided there's room on the ships. For naval battles, you use the same CRT as for field battles. The last player to move into the hex is the attacker. The naval units themselves don't have any combat capability. Use the right side combat factor, the bad terrain, on ground unit counters, which are on the ships. Determine the odds and roll on the CRT. This will be the normal CRT for land units. If you get attrition, both sides continue to lose a naval unit with its passengers until one side elects to rout with no additional losses. Which means carrying empty ships in your fleet allows you to survive this a little better. If you get a rout, the losing player loses units equal to the number of naval units in the enemy fleet. The remainder move up to 10 movement points towards a friendly port. The victorious player loses half as many naval units as the loser. I think you're allowed to use any kind of units, but I don't know. That's certainly how it reads. Am I going to have to go check again? It feels like I do. And on a destruction, all the naval units of the losing player are destroyed. The victorious player suffers no loss. This is just so weird. I'll be back. Clarification to that shit. What there is that if you have ground units in a naval force and the other side doesn't have ground units in their naval force, you wipe it out. That's fine. That felt self-evident. What's not clear is this kind of, you're probably going to be fighting on the coast, whether ground units can attack naval units on the coast outside of the Nile Delta. The rule is within the Nile Delta rules. The fleets in the Delta is where it says if military units enter a hex with enemy naval units alone in the hex, the naval units are destroyed. I think that's limited to the Delta. You actually need fleets to destroy fleets that are on the coast, but again, it's not worded that way. There's such sloppiness in these rules. I don't mind making that kind of decision, but it's fucking crazy. Okay. Greek fire. Byzantine naval units may be equipped with Greek fire once events 2 or 12 are rolled. We'll see when we get them. To use Greek fire, you roll on the Greek fire table, which is here. Prior to resolving the combat, cross-index the number of units using Greek fire with a die roll. The result is the number of Muslim naval units with their passengers that are destroyed at the Byzantine player's choice. But the Byzantine player also loses a single unit of the Muslim player's choice if the result is shaded. I assume that happens before you do prior to the combat. Succession. If Constans is killed, he's the emperor, for any reason, then his counter is removed permanently from the map board. Now, he's a leader, so it could happen. Empress Fausta Arshakuni is head of a new regency with the sitting patriarch until her children are of age. Her counter must remain in Constantinople, otherwise the game continues as normal. Now we have a patriarch over here. I'm assuming events will have something to do with them. They change and whatever. There's nothing on the back. I got no idea what can happen. For some reason it's in this Exarchate of Africa space. I don't know what that is. That, again, maybe shows up in some kind of event or something. But I don't have a hell of a lot of hope with that. Setup, I had some issues with setup, mainly with the coloring, but otherwise not much. The designer's notes, they were okay. They didn't go into a whole lot of detail that helped me with understanding any of these. Most of it's, I don't know. The one nice thing, the battle table is a reflection. Most battles were stalemates until one side gave way. Yeah, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is the attrition, which is really the stalemate result. The only thing that feels like a stalemate result is going to, like routing causes damage. Feels like it's pretty automatic. Destroyed, I mean, you wipe out the enemy force. So the stalemate feels like the thing that this talks about, well, that's one number on any size battle. And that doesn't really feel like it's very likely that people are going to trade, because for the most part, one side can choose not to take losses and can leave. There may be limitations on that, just like there are with the camp thing. I don't recall that. Let's go back to the reading of that, because that's, okay. Both sides, starting with the attacker, have to place a unit in. This continues back and forth until somebody routs. If the attacker is the one with remaining forces. Yeah, so basically it's the attacker takes one hit and the defender gets away. Which, it's a pretty bad result at the 4-1, but I'm fine with it. But it doesn't feel like it creates the kind of attritional battle that's actually there. Now, you don't know what the enemy forces are, I guess. You just know their total strength, I guess. Fog of War doesn't really span that terribly well, does it? Let's take a look at the combat rules. They just determine their total value. Yeah, it doesn't say that they get to see the opponent's units. So, you might know how big their stack is, maybe. I guess it's visible no matter what. And that could tell you something, but you don't really know the composition, whether you get some advantages. So that might cause attritional losses. to happen in cases where neither side, because of the uncertainty of the force composition, there might be some off chances where it's not just that one side leaves after taking a hit. Actually, the attacker can break off with no hits if they so wish. The problem with that is then I believe they're defeated. And yeah, they're defeated. So they have to break up and run more than 10 hexes away to other cities, which should be possible just about everywhere. But yeah, that could really disrupt your forces. That's the rules to this game. As much as I could incorporating the living rules, it doesn't really feel like the living rules were sufficient to cover a bunch of things that I felt needed clarification. There's apparent conflict of some degree or another between what the designer and the developer saw the game as. And yeah, I don't know. No matter how you get to it, though, the rules as written, even in that living rules version, yeah, maybe they nailed down all the absolute contradictions or left out parts, but they do leave some interesting questions as is this really what you fucking meant? It feels crazy. Certainly the thing in the Nile Delta, while I would give that a pass in most games, and I think the intention is that you can't fight things on the coast, that one sentence is not clear and probably should have been nailed down better, which leads me to wonder, hey, maybe there are some other things that aren't nailed down, but whatever. We'll give it a shot. This has depressed me a great deal because I had not fantastic experiences with Against the Odds magazines in terms of the games, but they felt solid. This one doesn't feel solid. This feels at least as bad as something like, from those 3W bad days from the 90s, stuff like Campaigns of Marlborough, but I don't suspect that this is going to be anywhere near as cool as that is. I just don't see the mechanisms having the same kind of aspect to them. But we'll see. All right, up it goes, I guess.